A little while ago, I made a video about this, foot position. And in it, I talked about how the best riders in the world, well, they do things better than normal humans. And on that list is something that is just as important as where you put your feet. You can see Ricky Brabec is doing it here, and well, he just won the Dakar. Chris Birch for sure does it, and when I don't do it, my riding falls apart. So let's break it down a little more.
Whoa. You okay?
I don't think it's up for debate that the handlebars are a huge part of the controls of a motorcycle. They are literally part of our steering. Counter-steering matters for better or for worse, and as a result, how we interact with the handlebars also has a pretty big effect over the bike, whether you intend it to or not. For example, have you ever ridden into a patch of mud or some short ruts and shot off to one side, aimed squarely at the bushes, wondering what the hell just happened? Have you ever had the front wheel wash out when standing up, or do you find it tricky to make tight turns? Just like our foot position changes how we move at the hips, our hand position changes how our upper body works. It alters the muscles that we use when we're riding, it changes our balance, it can be the determining factor over the direction of your bike, and it can dramatically alter how tired you get across the day. All of that just from where we put our hands. Let me show you. In this clip, my hands are in a suboptimal position. I'll explain more on what that actually looks like in a second, but for now, let's roll the clip. You can see that from the front, my elbows look a bit tucked in, and as I ride into the mud, it's difficult to get the bike tracking straight. It moves around a lot, and when it does, I'm making it worse. You can see that I'm a bit awkward. My shoulders are hunched and a little bit awkward and rigid. But to get a good view of this, let's throw the clip in a different riding position. Now you can see it is different. My elbows are wider, the bike runs straighter, and on the 360 camera, we're looking a bit more natural, shoulders in a little better position. The real key is that the bike rides straighter. I'm lighter on the bars. When the wheel moves, I'm not moving it more, and that makes it way easier to ride. So what's going on here? The traditional way of describing good upper body position is the cue elbows out. It's as old as time. I remember my dad saying it to me when I was a kid. I think just about every coach on planet Earth at some point has said elbows out to someone. But I think the problem is that it's a little bit more nuanced than this, especially if your background is from street or road riding and you're coming into off-road. When we ride on the street, having your hands plonked on the back of the handlebars, pushing and pulling to countersteer is very common. Fortnite even made a video about this subject related to street riding. And honestly, for most casual riding, there really is nothing wrong with this. I do it a lot too when I'm riding in a relaxed way on the street, and I think most of you probably do. When we transition from a sitting to a standing position, we encounter a pretty big problem. This is not working for me. Now, the cue of elbows out also falls flat a little bit here. In principle, elbows out is 100% good technique. This is exactly what you should be doing. This position is fantastic. But the problem is when my hands are square on behind the handlebars, I can't get into that position. Telling me to put my elbows out doesn't really work. It doesn't work in a sitting position or a standing position. And the knock-on effect of this position is that we have a lot of weight on the handlebars that we don't mean to have. And then we add in a lot of extra steering input as the front wheel moves around the terrain. To solve this, we need to do two things. Firstly, we need a complete readjustment of how we hold the handlebars, use the levers, and turn the throttle. The Fortnite ice cream analogy, while weird, is exactly right. Instead of being square onto the bars, we want to be holding it to a 90-degree ice cream style. We want our hands very much on top of the handlebars. So this clip, well, the audio didn't quite record, so it's going to be a bit like watching a dub movie for the next 20 seconds or so. The point here is that when we change, it helps us get into a better position on the bike. But now everything we've ever done feels different. The levers are essentially in a completely different place relative to us. You'll likely find you have to interact with the clutch and brake with different knuckles on your fingers to grip them, and your levers need to move outward from the bars a little more. On top of that, there is another cue to really cement this home, and they kind of work in unison together. Elbows high and wide. I have personally found this to be a nice cue to help highlight to people and myself when your hands are in a limiting position. The credit goes to Chris Birch for this one. He's the first person I ever heard describe it exactly like that. For some of us, it's one, some of us, it's the other, but both together kind of seems like the secret sauce. Now that we know what we're trying to achieve and how it might be limiting our riding, how do you fix it? The first part of solving this is rethinking how we interact with the handlebars. For the most part, I think hand and foot position is thought of as a static thing. With hand position especially, you have to change your grip for everything you do. Literally everything. That's why having a loose grip is so important. We can see here when I transition from sitting to standing, my hands change position completely. I'll play it again for you. And if we look at this clip of me braking, it is the same. This clip of me doing a slalom from the uphill tutorial. Every time I'm aiming for the same position in my body, but having to hold the bar in a different place.
That's all well and good, but we need a drill of some kind, something to practice to get better at this.
One of the best for this is single-handed riding. It forces you into making your body position better, moving way more on the bike and generally learning to be better balanced, because if you don't, it feels horrific.
The other thing you need is practice. Practice and to do drills that you expect to find relatively easy. Just because you can ride up a steep rocky hill and get to the top doesn't mean that that's where you build the foundation of your technique or improve at a skill. I'd recommend popping out some really simple cone drills, a snake, a slalom, a square, and working on building that technique in a relatively low stress environment. Once you've got that, then I try and do it one-handed.
And then when the going gets trickier, you can avoid reverting to the old position. It's gonna take time, you are gonna mess it up, but as long as you're having fun, don't stress it, and remember, life's better when you're riding.